That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Napoleon, the 28th film directed by Ridley Scott that's being released courtesy of Columbia Pictures just in time for Thanksgiving, November 22nd, 2023.
Ridley Scott did Alien.
Oh, God. I mean, his early work's fantastic, like Alien and Blade Runner. This is a reunion with Joaquin Phoenix from Gladiator. I mean, we reviewed House of Gucci. You've seen many films of his.
Well, this film, an epic that details the checkered rise and fall of French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte and his relentless journey to power through the prism of his addictive, volatile relationship with his wife, Josephine. What's your pull quote?
A battle-laden pilgrimage through the historical highlights of France's most prolific emperor cuts considerable corners in conceiving his military machinations. Questionable casting, jarring tonal shifts, and a repetitive dependence on the battlefield make this a mixed bag.
I wrote, all you need to know about this epic historical drama about France's most iconic leader is that no one speaks French.
Well, it's already gotten charges of being historically inaccurate, but...
This shit was a mess. Like, even the premise I just read, it feels more grand than it actually is. Because it's kind of like three movies. It's a movie with like all these battle sequences that just feel like, oh, we shot these, let's just shove them in. Then we sort of see how Napoleon came to be the emperor, and then how he...
Kind of.
...was exiled, kind of.
From his point of view...
And
you should make yourself king. Okay.
And then this addictive, volatile relationship with his wife, Josephine, that I feel could have been its own movie. And I understand there's like a 4.5-hour director's cut that focuses more on that. I could see how there probably is a lot of footage, because I didn't understand their relationship much at all.
I don't want to watch the 4.5-hour version of this that apparently is going to be released on Apple TV, but I would, because I think it's almost needed, because Scott is trying to pack so much in here that this edit of it, all of those things seem compromised.
I just can't get over movies like this where people don't speak the language of the region and in the time, like...
Well,
it's so distracting to me. And then everyone speaks English. It doesn't matter if they're from Russia, from where. And we only get two characters speak, I believe it's German, maybe?
Well, because the Austrian prince.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
That they each say like one line in German, and then we get subtitles. What was the point of a 2.5-hour movie, and then you get two characters saying two lines to each other in German?
It's funny, for such an epic too, the supporting cast is really diminished. They do have some French speakers in there. Tahar Rahim is Paul Barras in the beginning, who's in charge of the French army that kind of gives Napoleon his first big chance to do something. And then she must be in the 4.5-hour credit, or I just missed her because she more altered than I thought. I don't know. I did not see Ludivine Sagnier in this. She's in it.
So the story is, we see Napoleon, like, he's part of some army, and then he's given the opportunity to like lead a battle that is successful, and then he's made like brigadier general, and then he uses that with, who's the person who's like his boss?
That's Tahar Rahim.
What is that person's title?
He's in charge of the French army.
Oh,
and
okay.
Remember, and it starts at the beginning of the French Revolution. The opening scene is Marie Antoinette being beheaded, and we're told that Napoleon is a Corsican that's waiting for a promotion. So we see him without an expression on his face watching her die. And then we go through all of the turmoil and the end of the Reign of Terror and the royalists who still wanted the monarchy and their attempted insurrection, etc. And his defeat of, that insurrection also is a stepping stone in his glory.
I'm ignorant to all of this history, so watching it, I was a little confused. Like, I got the essence of what was happening, but there isn't a lot of explanation or guidance as to where we are in history and who's important to whom. So anyway, we see that Napoleon sort of becomes popular with the people because of his battle style and his victories, which is another problem I have, because it's sort of made clear that Napoleon had a very different style of war, but then the film doesn't explain how it was different from, like, how he was able to be successful.
It doesn't, and I don't know if that's because of this edit, but it does a poor job of that.
He even says some other general from another country studying the art of war, and they're copying him.
The Russian Tsar, yeah.
But it's like, what is he copying? Well, you haven't explained to us what you do so differently. So then there's that. Then there's a final battle, I guess, related to World War One.
No.
I mean, I don't know. It doesn't say. So anyway, it's like Russia, England, whatever. Like all these.
Oh, are we talking about 1812 when he attempts to?
No.
Okay.
Well, yes, at the end.
That's Waterloo.
Okay, so then Napoleon gets exiled at a point.
It's because he attempts to conquer Russia, and he is not prepared to deal with the Russian winter, and he decimates.
He brings 600,000 soldiers and comes back with 40,000.
Yes.
So they're like, we're good. We'll give you a pension. We'll give your ex-wife a pension.
So he goes to Elba. Mm-hmm.
So he gets exiled to some island, and then all of a sudden, he just commandeers a ship, and comes back to France. And takes over the army. And I thought that scene was so crunchy because King Louis gets notice. The French government, whatever, gets noticed that Napoleon is back. And they're like, we'll send the troops down to stop his ass and put him back on the island. So this movie, because of Joaquin Phoenix, who I really like.
I do too.
It felt like a comedy. And people were laughing in the theater. And there were many moments when it felt like an SNL skit to me. Or like a parody of
drunk history.
Yeah, or like a drunk history skit. This really felt like a parody of a real historical drama that's like historically accurate. But anyway, Napoleon shows up back on French land and the troops come and he's like, hey, y'all know me.
He goes, I missed you guys.
I missed y'all. And they are literally like, yay, we're on your side again. And then all of a sudden, he's like in charge of the army again. I don't understand how that happened. The film does not explain. And then he goes back to battle to Waterloo, loses.
Yes, and the European world powers kind of try to gang up together on him, and his defense for Waterloo is, if I can defeat their armies one by one, I can take them down and usurp control of France again. But Rupert Everett, who plays the Duke of Wellington, is able to keep him in battle long enough for the other armies to show up. And of course, as Abba has ruined for us, Napoleon did surrender at Waterloo.
Anyway, after the defeat in Waterloo, Napoleon gets exiled again. And then we get texts that tell us that he spent like 6 years in exile before he died. Okay, so then there's that. And then, of course, all these battle sequences, which are shot very well.
Darius Wolski. Yes.
Nothing blew me away, but it does feel like a big production. Okay, then there's Josephine. So Josephine is literally, I mean, I would say she's a hoe. Like
Vanessa Kirby. Well, she survived the revolution. Her husband was beheaded, a royalist.
Napoleon sees her once and is attracted to her, and she's very aggressive with him. He's like, don't even tell me your name. I don't need to know. And then one day he's sitting in his office and this little boy comes and she's like, oh, my dad was killed and you took his sword. Can I have it back? And Napoleon's like, why would I give you a sword back? No citizens are supposed to have weapons. Well, my mom says you're the only man with the power to do it. So of course that appeals to his ego. So he goes and gets a sword because none of these swords are labeled. So he doesn't know. There are like hundreds of swords. He doesn't know who's this little boy's father, which sword is his. So anyway, Napoleon grabs the sword, goes to the boy's house, and guess who that little boy's mother is? Josephine.
Vanessa Kirby.
And then they begin a very quick romance. They get married, and then it really just becomes about Napoleon wanting an heir, a son, but then also Josephine like cheats on him immediately. The way the film is shot. So then they have some issues, but they mend their issues. She can't have a kid because it's tested. Napoleon's mom actually because she wants to rule out that maybe like Napoleon is sterile. So she hires a young girl to try to get pregnant by Napoleon, and she does. So that's when we know, oh, Josephine can't bear children anymore. Even though she has 2 kids, we see,
right?
Who we meet them in the beginning, and then we don't see those kids again until the.
Well, I don't know. I didn't double check. Well, Josephine's about the same age as Napoleon, so yeah, ostensibly they're supposed to be in their late 20s, I think.
I don't know. They look. Joaquin does not look like a young man at any point in this movie.
He does not, but I think he was born. Napoleon's born in 1769, and this film opens in 1789. So he's supposed to be in his 20s when we see him watching Marie Antoinette die. He does not look in his 20s.
Anyway, because Josephine can't have children, and he's the emperor, she's the empress. They have to get like an official separation, like a dissolution of marriage, so that he can then find another wife to have a baby with. So they get divorced, but he takes care of her. Like she gets quite a nice little package. Like she gets like 1 million francs a year, and these properties and like servants. So she's living real swell.
And she doesn't have to deal with him anymore.
She doesn't deal with his ass anymore. So there's that. He does end up getting some lady pregnant, some like 15-year-old, who I think is the daughter of some prince. I don't know where she came from, but he has a kid with her, and then we don't see that kid again at all. We don't know what happened to that little boy.
But he brings it to Vanessa Kirby to look at, and she's like, "This is what I want from you." And
well, she tells the little baby, like, "I hope you learn that."
What I would have sacrificed.
Like the sacrifices I made so you could be born. But then we don't know what happened to that baby.
Well, we don't even see her bio kids until the very end.
Again, this shit was a mess. But I'm just gonna go through my notes. So Joaquin Phoenix is a very good actor. Like I really like him on screen. But the problem is that he has that demeanor that makes you feel sorry for him. And then some of the dialogue, I believe, was written to be intentionally funny.
Oh yeah, when is he screaming at the Austrian about you guys just think you're special because you have boats?
He's funny and cute, Joaquin Phoenix, in this role, but I don't think that this is how this man should be played. If I were French, I'd be so offended by this movie, but...
Well, yeah, just like the Italian should have been a House of Gucci. But this was written by David Scarpa, who did All the Money in the World for Ridley Scott.
But anyway, the first time we see Napoleon lead battle, he looks scared as hell. And I thought the trajectory of like when we first meet him till the end, it is actually well done because he's developed this confidence, and then he does this thing where he kind of like is like right in front of the battle and he'll just like close his eyes and seem to meditate, which is a far cry from him looking so frightened in the first battle we see. So I thought that character work was done well.
He has this thing where he looks like a lizard sunning himself.
But I would call this a comedy. You know how the Golden Globes like to label stuff like, oh, this is a musical, or I feel like this movie is more comedy than anything.
Well, he had his diction at some points. Like there are all these scenes where he's screaming, and like I wrote down Roberta George because that's what it sounded like when he says, "Prepare to charge."
Well, he has a very distinct voice, and he has a speech impediment. So, and then there's a lot of dialogue, and he narrates the film at times.
Well, they're reading letters that have been preserved between Josephine.
I found it very distracting, knowing that this man should be speaking French, and it's Joaquin Phoenix and his little speech impediment.
Well, also his tone, when he's narrating letters he's written to Josephine about love, and he sounds crazy.
Oh, and then those letters are important because we find out that part of what gets him hemmed up initially is that he's been writing letters to Josephine, like groveling, begging, like, how come you don't write me and you don't love me and you better not be cheating on me? And those letters get leaked.
You should love me with love that's more than love.
So in the newspaper, there are headlines basically like Napoleon's ladies cheating on him. So he gets mad and leaves battle, which is considered desertion, and he gets in trouble for that. But then at the end of the movie, when Napoleon is exiled, he first stops to go see Josephine, and we find out that she died some time ago from diphtheria. And of course he's devastated, like, why didn't anyone tell me? That's when we're reintroduced to one of her children who we haven't seen in 2 hours. And she explains that because he's paranoid, like, where are all the letters I wrote her? Because they're very personal and intimate. And she's like, oh, well, her valet sold them. I would actually be curious if that's true. I'm sure that there's a book somewhere with those letters. I would actually like to read those letters. But before we even get to the letter writing, when Josephine and Napoleon sort of have their first date, she tells him, like, you know, I've been around the block a few times. I had to do some things to get by. If that's okay with you, then great. And he says, yeah, it doesn't bother me. And then she lifts up her skirt and says, you can look down there. There's a surprise for you. But once you see it, you'll always want it. I thought she was pretty bold, and I did like her character,
I like Vanessa Kirby.
that actor
Yeah.
and the characterization. But then we get like 3 sex scenes where we see, 2 specifically, where we see Napoleon having sex with her. That is so just unappealing.
He's presented as not being a really good sex person.
Again, as someone who's not very knowledgeable about general world history, the only thing I know about Napoleon is that he's supposed to be little, and then people use that as like, if you have a Napoleon complex, like you're trying to compensate for being inadequate. So, and then that maybe he was kind of an idiot. And I could be wrong, but that's what I think. This movie does do, like, I feel like it's presenting him as kind of like a loser.
It is, but I don't get the sense of what an egotistical, power-hungry person he was, because it seems like we're just seeing there are a lot of battle sequences. The one where he leads the Russians out into the ice and they fall in is probably the best one.
Yeah.
But none of them have any real kind of impact, especially if you've seen Ridley Scott's filmography, where there are a lot of epics and a lot of battle sequences. So I don't know what's really differentiating this. But otherwise, it's a lot of conversations of people saying like, well, this 3-tiered council we have going on is not working. Why don't you just become Emperor of France? And then the next scene is and there's a coronation
And then there's also a coup that is kind of comedic. Like, I didn't understand why it has this comedic tone. But the situation between Josephine and Napoleon comes to a head when he's frustrated, like, we can't have children. And there's a dinner in particular where he screams at her, like, bear me a child tonight. And if you don't, we're going to get a divorce. And then they have a food fight.
Yeah.
Again, that felt like a comedy.
I like how you commented, he seems to, at least as they're positioned in this film, to love her. He almost treats her kind of like one of the guys.
Oh, yes, because, well, you just alluded to, like, he doesn't seem that vile. Like, for a dictator in the early 1800s, late 1700s, he seems like actually like a really nice, reasonable guy. And we would qualify his behavior towards Josephine as abusive, but it's because he's a little too physical with her.
Yeah.
But it almost feels like if 2 like guy friends were hanging out and how they punch each other, that's how he treated her, which I'm not saying is appropriate.
No.
But I think if we think about other leaders during that period, the way Napoleon's presented was like, well, he's not that bad.
Well, during the divorce proceedings where she has to read out a statement she clearly didn't write about how they have to put the perseverance of France above their own relationship, and she's kind of crying and also mocking this garbage that she has to state. He slaps her kind of like, come on, get yourself together.
Yeah, but even that slap was more like, get yourself together,
right.
Bitch. It wasn't like, I'm going to beat you.
No.
Again, it's not appropriate to hit people, but I just thought like he's just presented in such an odd way that I didn't quite understand how people even listen to him. Right,
and I had all intentions of, because there are several Napoleon biopics. There's a famous silent version. Sacha Guitry did a version in 1955 with Jean-Pierre Amont, which I wanted to watch. But those are all kind of epic in scale too, and that's a lot of Napoleon in one week.
The final nail in the coffin for me of why this movie is just ridiculous is once Napoleon finds out he's exiled for a second time, he says, I love France too much. Like I guess I'm in this predicament because I love France too much.
But not its people.
And he said it in English. And I'm just like...
Because you slaughtered so many of them.
Well, that too. But I just thought like, this is so... It's so bold to make a movie about this figure and not have it be in the language they spoke. And then when he said I love France too much in English, it just took me
From
out.
a British director.
And then a lot of the French people have that like vague Europea British accent, which I guess is better than them trying to have these characters sound like Pepe Le Pew, but that's just so weird to me.
Well, it's like when the British man is screaming about the goats, it's like, you sound like the British and you're fighting the British, but okay.
One more time, where was Napoleon's son? We spent so much time talking about him trying to bear a child. He finally gets one, and then we don't hear anything. Not even in the end credits where we hear about what happened to Napoleon after he was exiled, We don't hear anything about his son.
Yeah, where'd he go? Rupert Everett is one of the few people in the supporting cast outside of Kirby and Phoenix that stands out because I thought he was a little entertaining.
He has a lot of presence, yeah.
He does, but he is the one that sits down to Napoleon and says, we're going to for his second exile. And he's like, well, you can take 3 officers and 12 footmen or whatever. It's like, if I was one of those people, I'd be like, why do I have to be an exile?
Napoleon got a really nice package in exile too. He got like 2 million francs a year and like
better than what happened to Marie Antoinette, that's for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, this movie felt like a joke to me. What would you give it?
I think in the spectrum of Scott's filmography, it goes back to his debut as The Duelist with Harvey Keitel, which I think is highly worth watching. But you know, he continually returns to these battle historical epics, and I think that he gets kind of hemmed up in his own vision. You know, like Gladiator, Exodus, Gods and Kings is kind of on the low end. You know, he did 1492 Conquest of Paradise, where he had Gerard Depardieu. He's not good with casting these leads. Gerard Depardieu, French, playing Columbus, and then making him speak English, even though you shouldn't have had that man doing that for that 3-hour-long movie. I think this is in the middle ground in comparison to Scott's own work. I think the director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven ranks up there with some of his better stuff. And maybe eventually I would think that about the director's cut of Napoleon, but I would give this 2.5.
I can't even say it's okay because I don't think it's okay that it's in English. So I'm giving it 2 out of 5. Anything else?
No.
Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.